So I was just looking at the slide. So I'm actually not from Spain. So I was born in Argentina, but my family is from Slovenia. So originally, all of my grandparents are from here. The fact is, I actually lived in Spain as well. I lived in, like, I think 10 countries by now, so I've been always moving around.
Yeah.
But it's always great to come back here to Slovenia as well.
Yeah, I'm not from Russia as well. But moving around, like, it's super hard to determine where you're based. Okay, so what do you do, in fact?
So to keep it short, so I have now a startup called UniPlaces.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, we are a platform for student accommodation. So helping students, when they go to study to another city, find a place to stay and make the process as seamless and smooth as possible.
Okay. So which region do you cover?
So the countries we cover now, it's pretty much the major markets across Europe.
Okay.
So Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, the UK. That's where we have our accommodation, that's where we are based. But in terms of students that we place, they come from pretty much every country. From the latest, we've got 165 nationalities that book through UniPlaces.
Nice. Let's take a step back. Like, how did your career start? Like, where did you start? What did you do?
So I studied in London. I was
Okay.
at King's College over there. That's when I was first interested in, in startups, entrepreneurship. I didn't really know what it was about. So like many people in London, I actually went to banking. So I spent about a year working at Goldman Sachs over there. And when I was there, obviously it was a great experience. I met a lot of smart and interesting people. But I realized that I don't see myself in a sort of corporate environment for too long. So I decided to make something completely different. That was the time when Groupon was growing. I think probably a lot of you know the history of Groupon. And I spoke with some friends I had over there. And basically, a week after that first call with a friend, I moved to Japan. So I went to Tokyo. I went to help expand Groupon over there. Then moved to China. I did the same over there. So we were working, expanding the platform across the Chinese market, which was a super interesting experience. And it was during that time that I was actually speaking with a couple of friends of mine that we all had the same kind of interest. We all wanted to eventually kind of do a project of our own, try to do something by ourselves. And we were brainstorming a bunch of ideas, like we were speaking every day. At the time, because I was in China, so one of my friends, Ben, he was in London. He was working there in a private equity fund. And the third one, Miguel, he was in China for a while doing a master's, and then moved to Boston to do the final semester. So we were kind of in 3 continents, doing the Skype calls at the weird times of the day to make sure we could all get at the same time, until we decided to kind of quit, to leave all of that, and launch something of our own. And we moved to Portugal. I can tell you a bit about that. It was a bit of a decision we had to take. Since we were in 3 continents, we had to literally pick a city in the world, like where we want to go, and decide that. In the beginning, we were thinking maybe London, because we lived there before. I studied there, Ben was there, and so on. But you guys all know London's super expensive. It's definitely not the most friendly city when you just quit your job and you want to start something from scratch and you don't really even know what you're going to do or how you're going to do it.
Which city?
No, I'm saying if you go to London, which is what we were thinking, that would not be the case. And Miguel, one of the co-founders, so he's Portuguese, and we spoke about why don't we go to Portugal? It seems a good country. I'd never been before, and also for me it was like a great experience. So I said, let's go for it, and we went, and that's how it kind of slowly all started out of there.
So you started Groupon in China from zero.
So we were about 20 of us when we started.
Yes.
We went to China, and at the time was before the IPO of Groupon. So the objective was really grow as fast as we could possibly do it. Get the whole market, take over everything, and that would inflate also. It would increase the numbers for the IPO because of the size of the market. What we've done is we launch out of 3 hubs, so Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. And we launched from those 20 people. We then grew across 45 to 50 cities. And we grew up to almost 3,000 people in 6 months, which sounds impossible in Europe, but for China, that actually works. We hire 10 people per day each, and so on. So it was really, really fast growth. The fact is that we had huge competition as well. The Chinese market was super extreme. We had 5,000 direct competitors in China, and 10 of them had more funding than we did have. And Groupon for China, we allocated $100 million, And if you think that 10 companies had more funding than that, it got into quite an aggressive war to win the market there.
Yeah. And after Groupon, you worked in
Wimdu.
Wimdu? What is Wimdu?
So when I was at Groupon, and that's when I already started to speak with my two co-founders now about doing something in the travel and accommodation space.
Yeah.
And that was the time when Airbnb was starting to grow as well. It was a small startup at the time. We were observing that market because we found it quite interesting. And Rocket Internet decided to clone Airbnb and create a company called Wimdu. So Rocket was the same investor that invested in Groupon as well. And through that network, I basically moved to Wimdu and helped also Wimdu expand across China. Since I was doing that for Groupon, then it was pretty much the same. We launched across a number of cities there, and so how you could build a platform for housing. Obviously that was different. It was a short stay market where it's the same model as Airbnb, where people book accommodation for like a day or 2 days, more like instead of a hotel. But it was really interesting space, and I spent there a few months until we decided to leave all of that.
Yeah, I remember a story of Brian Chance, founder of Airbnb. He was saying like we were this close to acquire Wimdu.
Yeah.
The only reason why we didn't not is because it took us 6 months to hire first person because of culture fit, while Wimdu had like in 6 months how many employees?
So we had about 400 globally.
Yeah, so to acquire 400 people without any check. So how do you manage to have this build culture inside of company when you're hiring so fast?
Yeah, I think culture is a very, very important topic in any startup. When you say how did we manage, I think at Wimdu and at Groupon we didn't actually manage. So culture there was actually not the important thing, and I think that's not good. That's the way Rocket Internet operates quite often. So when you grow too fast, you hire too many people, it stops being about the culture, and that eventually doesn't become sustainable often. So now with UniPlaces, obviously we look at it very differently. For us, culture is like one of the most important things. One of the criteria always when you hire people is like cultural fit. Like if someone is very good, has the best skills, is a perfect, in terms of the position, but we don't feel it fits culturally, we won't hire that person. Because we've seen that's really so important. You need everyone to, to be pretty much part of the family. Like everyone needs to believe in the vision. Everyone needs to be able to work with each other, and in a company, eventually develop that culture, like make sure everyone is engaged and so on. So anyone that comes in needs to fit into that, And we had cases, obviously, where we felt someone wasn't a fit for the culture, and we had to let that person go, literally because we didn't believe that would be sustainable in the long run.
Yeah. So okay, how do you manage to hire so many people in a short time?
So the thing is now with UniPlaces, it's not that many people. That was in China. It was a very different story. So with UniPlaces, obviously, we select every candidate. We have a number of interviews always, but at the same time, we need to be fast, So everyone needs to own let's say, their own hire. Like if you have a team, you need to make sure you have the candidates, you bring them in, But eventually, we need to go through the same, quite rigorous interview process so that we can, make sure we have the right fit. In terms of at UniPlaces now, we're about 140 people, and we've been actually quite constant for the last 12 months or so. We haven't been growing that much in terms of headcount, and that's really because of that quality aspect.
Yes, so for UniPlaces, is it connected with Wimdu? Did you get inspired there? How did you find this idea?
So how did I find the idea? I think that was it's an interesting question. A lot of times when people want to do a startup, the question is like, do you have this, aha moment that you come with the idea, and you know from day one everything you're going to do and how it's going to work. The reality is that that's not how it happens, Yeah. So when I was saying I was with my two co-founders, we left China, we went to Portugal. We actually didn't know anything about UniPlaces really at the time. We had, sorry, microphone is pulling off. We had 3 different ideas. One was in the very UniPlaces, space sort of accommodation. Then there was another one in the travel space, and another one was, well, both in travel, but different categories. And what happened is when we were in Portugal, first of all, we went there, and because my co-founder is Portuguese, we got basically his parents had like a kind of a holiday house, and we got them to, they offered that they offer us to be able to stay there for free. So we didn't pay a rent, so we literally, that's why we went to Portugal pretty much in the first place. But then it happened at a time, like 2 months later, like a month and a half later, that they told us we have to leave because they have a wedding and they want to organize some event. So we had to find another place to live. And that's when actually we went to speak to some friends of ours that studied in Porto, which is a city in the north of Portugal. And we asked them, how do you find a place to stay here in Porto? Like if I want to rent an apartment or room. And literally what they told us is, go to the university, check out the trees outside the campus. There's definitely some ads on those trees, and maybe you can call those people, and if you're lucky, you're gonna find a place. And that got us thinking, We were like, there must be a better way to rent an apartment than going to check out the trees, especially because it was raining that day, and like we didn't want to go to check out those trees outside the university. And that's how we started to really understand, how students, face the problem of finding accommodation. We went to investigate. We also thought, obviously, before about how we faced that same problem in London, in elsewhere where we studied. And we found out that those challenges of finding a place to stay, are common to a lot of students in a number of countries, And that experience of, having to check out the trees on campus or look on a classified portal, and there's lots of scams and that sort of things and fraud that happens in those platforms. We saw all these problems, and like the more we investigated that and we researched how things work and so on, the more we kind of got excited about that, And that's when we started to really, one of those ideas we had, we were evolving it completely into, let's do something, for students. Let's improve this experience, make the solution better. There must be a way, especially we've seen Airbnb, we've seen WIM doing that on the short stay, and there was literally nothing, done properly on the long-term aspect for students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when did you start with UniPlaces?
So that was about 4 or 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago. So you started, first initial market was Portugal.
So we went to Portugal. That's when we actually launched,
Yeah.
And to be honest, like when I was saying we were interested in fixing this problem and finding a solution for it. We didn't really know what the solution was going to be.
Yeah.
So we launched a website, and the way that happened was literally like a friend of ours that we knew. He was the sort of the president of one of the student unions. And he told us, basically, when we asked him what happens with student accommodation there, and he told us the problem they have is the following. There's every day, pretty much, landlords that come to him, to the student union, given a piece of paper, an ad of an apartment, and then like he had like 3 students there, like 3 interns, copying those ads into a spreadsheet. And then when students would come to ask, like, how do you find a place here, they would send them the spreadsheet, And he told us if we, because he knew that we were interested in something there, and he said that if we, change that spreadsheet for like a website, maybe instead of sending the link to a spreadsheet, he would send the link to the website. And that was for us that moment where we said, let's actually launch this. So in a weekend, pretty much, that's when we came up with UniPlaces' name. We got a friend designer to do a logo, which looks a lot worse than the current one, but was kind of the original one. We got then one of these, very basic website template sort of thing adapted, and we came up with the website in a weekend. We got this friend give us a database, and on Monday we came back to him and said, here's the website, get it out there. But the thing is that website, obviously, then over time we were improving it and so on, but didn't really have a solid business model behind it. It was a classified portal, so people would list, like they could message each other, and like, the transactions would happen off the platform,
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't control the experience, we wouldn't control the quality, and there's a lot of challenges around that, But we went through a few iterations of that. That's when we start to get some awards of startups. We participate like in every startup competition at the time, to get free office space, free resources. We got free office space in Porto, then in Lisbon, and that's when we actually moved our office to Lisbon, pretty much because of that. And it got to the point that we were speaking to our customers, students, landlords, also universities. And the questions they were asking us was all about, how do you know that a house listed on this website is real? How do you know it's not fake? Then if I message a landlord and they say, send me 2 months of rent, via Western Union to this strange account here, how do you know that this is actually going to be there? So, with all this kind of feedback, we decided, to really test how to move away from there. Like, we tested, would students actually pay online to rent, Now it seems obvious, seems common, but at the time, 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't believe that was actually going to be the case. Even in the short stay market, you had Airbnb and HomeAway. And HomeAway was the big player at the time, and they didn't have transactions online. It was very different, you know? So that's the model we worked, but we tested a couple of times. We put like some sort of feature, like buttons, people book now, and then, you know, we got people to pay, and we actually got 10 people to transfer us like 2 months of rent to our bank account that we then pay to the landlord, you know, and we've seen that people are actually interested to pay online to rent an apartment, you know, to study. Yeah. And that's when we decided, you know, we'll just close this down, completely shut it down, rebuild it from scratch, you know, with a completely different model where we would, you know, own the transaction. So someone would come to our website, we would book online directly there. We would verify the accommodation, you know, go there, take photos, you know, make sure that we have all the information, the floor plans, everything that's included in the house, so that, you know, you can look on the platform, see what's there, and like, you know that, you know, if you book that, that's really what it's going to look like, you know. And then we launched with that new platform in Lisbon. Was our first city where we launched. And we started to get bookings immediately. In the first day, we got 2 people to book, then like 3 in the second, like, and so on. And we've seen that, you know, with the new model, obviously then we were taking a commission of each of these transactions. And in the first week, we made like more revenue than the past 6 months or more with the previous model. So it was clearly the business model was there, you know, and I think that was how it really started to then, you know, think of growing and scaling to more countries and cities.
Okay, I would encourage audience to post questions on the app if you're interested in the topic, and you can vote for the questions. So do you work in Slovenia? Does UniPlaces has listings in Slovenia?
Not yet. I would say not yet. There is definitely an interesting opportunity here.
There is. We were last night at some student party. There's a lot of students here.
There must be, yeah, there's Ljubljana, there's here Maribor, there's a number of cities. At the moment, we are focusing on some of the bigger hubs across Europe. So our model is very, you know, the way we look at expansion to more markets, you know, it's very much about like getting a city from like nothing to liquidity. Liquidity means that, you know, we want to have every apartment in that city and like every student and, you know, have the brand, because that's when things actually start working. You know, if we try, you know, we went in the past to try to grow across a number of cities, you know, too quickly. And then what we realize is that if you expand too quickly, first you dilute your resources and you're not able to really invest enough in every single of these markets. And eventually, if you have a platform where you only have, whatever, 100 apartments and, you know, like not much marketing there, it's not going to work, you know? So, you know, we're really focusing on market by market, like dominating them, getting the market share, you know, building the presence out there, and then growing. But, you know, the objective is, you know, to get better and better and faster at this. So we'll get to Slovenia hopefully soon.
Yep. So regarding startups, so what they need actually to achieve this expansion? What are checklists like to be done?
Yeah. So it's a, you know, it's a tricky question, you know, because there's not magic formula, like hand you do this exact thing and you can then just grow as fast as you can, you know. It's a combination of things, you know, and you need to have, you know, first you need to have the right business model. You need to have a, you know, what people call often a product market fit, which means that, you know, your customers actually want your product, you know. If you speak to customers and they say, we don't like this service, then you're not going to be able to grow it fast because you're not going to be able to acquire customers fast enough, you know. So that's really the first thing, is like the foundation of it, you know. So you need to get at, and, you know, when you launch a startup in the early stages, it should all be about that, you know. I think a mistake a lot of people do is try to grow and scale too quickly with a business model that's not right or that it's not developed, you know. And then obviously they get to a stage that, you know, it fails because scaling, it consumes a lot of resources, it costs a lot of money, and if you don't generate the revenue fast enough, and then if you cannot, for example, raise enough funding, then it's just not going to go. So I think the business model is key. Have that ready, then have a, you know, prove that you have a model to grow systematically, you know. And for a case like UniPlaces, what does that mean is that, you know, we want to be able to go to market and know exactly how long it's going to take to go from like 0 to like profitability in the market. You know, what exactly is going to be the structure to do, what's the team, what's the process, what's everything you need to put in place to make that happen, and also how much it's going to cost, you know, because it requires an investment, you know. So if you want to grow fast, you need to know how much each of these markets is going to cost you and budget that and have the funding for that in place, you know. And all these things need to really fit in place. And then obviously the obvious thing, like, which is not about scaling, but in general, having the right team in place. That's so important. Like, I think that's probably the first thing as well. If you have the wrong people, it's not going to go anywhere. Even though you have all the other things in check, it's not going to happen. So that's why going back to investing in not just culture, but also the right talent and the right, the right teams, that's really, a key ingredient for that.
Okay. We have a question. Would you sell or merge with Airbnb? So basically, would you feel comfortable being acquired by Airbnb?
Yeah. It's a good question. Obviously, today Airbnb is huge. I think last valuation is about 30 billion, and so on. So people ask us that question, is Airbnb a competitor, or would you sell to them, or something like that? The way we look at this is that, we see the student accommodation market so big, like if you look globally, students, like they spend $500 billion on non-academic expenses, so it's $500 billion. Over a third of that goes for accommodation, so it goes for rent. So it's about a $200+ billion market just for student accommodation globally. And with such a big market, and there's no player dominating this market globally today, we see the opportunity to make UniPlaces that global player, So we're not really, like aiming to build something and then sell it to bigger company. We want to become that global player on its own. And it's a different market, like what Airbnb is focusing on is a lot on the short stays and the travel space. There's definitely a percentage overlap in some areas, but it's not the core, And when we position the brand around students, the brand around, the student accommodation and then the student experience, we see a lot more potential there. We see also accommodation as the first step in what we're doing. Once we build the trust with students, with universities and so on, we can use that platform to also offer other services that the student might need, I don't know if you guys have been in how do you call the fairs when the semester starts in universities. You always see like the banks, insurance companies, telecoms companies, bunch of companies over there. They all want to capture those students when they start their classes.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is that the first thing that a student does when they go to study somewhere tends to be look for accommodation. So on average, we see in UniPlaces they book 2 to 3 months before they actually start the academic semester. So we are the ones that know exactly who is going to study where they're going to live, how much they can afford, because we know what's the price of the accommodation they rented, we know what university they're going to go to, and we are in the best position to actually offer them all these other things if you wanted to in future. So we see there is such a big opportunity out there that rather than thinking of selling and like making a quick exit, is more about building that global brand and becoming the dominant global player.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of investments you raised?
So what kind of investment? So far, we raised a couple of rounds of funding. Okay. I can give you maybe a bit of the history. So in total, we closed about $30 million so far. Mm-hmm. That was in a number of phases. The first round was about $200K. That was before we even launched our new business model. It was on the old classified platform model, and that's when we raised that first round, which allowed us to actually, start hiring some people and building a team and really, iterating on that. Then when we launched the platform and we started to see some growth coming in, we did a round of funding with Octopus Ventures, which is a London-based VC fund. We raised first just under €1 million from them. Then a few months later, we raised another 3 million. So that was the phase with Octopus. And then end of 2015, so just over a year ago, we raised another $24 million roughly from Atomico. Atomico is the fund from Niklas Zenström, who is the founder of Skype. And it's a great fund. We've been working a lot with them and had a great experience and like a lot the support they provide in terms of growth and everything that we need.
There was a question there,
okay.
And would you accept corporate investment?
Corporate investment. So it's an interesting question because, to be honest, we haven't actually been speaking with corporates about investing. We raised from venture capital funds. Now, that really depends on who is at corporate. Why would we be looking for investment from them? I wouldn't say no, obviously, but that depends really on the situation, the corporate. Often when you raise funding from a corporate, tends to be with a view to kind of sell to that corporate in the future or because of some very strategic connection, So if there was some sort of strategic fit like that, obviously it could make sense. Otherwise, just to raise money from a corporate, depends.
So what are the numbers of users? How many transactions per month you make? How many users, registers you have on the platform?
Yeah, so I mean, the concept of registered users and so on maybe applies a bit more to to different kind of maybe apps or services or people
Okay.
sign up. What matters obviously for us is the number of transactions, the number of bookings that we place, the revenue we make from our landlords, and eventually how much market share we've got in every market. So in terms of how much we place students, this year we are aiming to get 100 million euro in contracts through our platform.
Yeah.
So that's it's 4 times last year, so been growing at 3-4 times now year on year, and we expect the same growth also next year to 300 or 400 million.
Okay, how do you advertise? How do you get publicity? And what's your tip for the startups? How to get this attention to their product? And this is our last question.
So we have a challenge because we are a marketplace.
Yeah.
So when you say how to advertise, you have to acquire on one side the people that have the apartments, so the landlords, accommodation providers, and the other side the students.
Yes.
So it's a common kind of marketplace problem. And like both have different strategies. So if you look on we call it supply side, which is accommodation, we do a lot of sales efforts, so it goes mainly through sales. So you have a team out of Portugal doing sales, and then in every major country or major city in these countries, we have a local team, who works with accommodation providers, engages them and brings them on board. So it requires a lot of sales, account management efforts to bring those players. But also, obviously we do also marketing, different channels. We advertise online, we do events for them, we produce content, all the kind of stuff to be the leader in the space, and people recognize you as such. Now, on the student side, there's obviously, the typical channels we use, Google, we use a bit of Facebook, but then where we see a lot of potential and where we're investing a lot is, get the presence through the universities, because that's where all students are. And let's say if you go study from here to whatever, the Technische Universität in Munich or in some other city, if everyone at the university knows about UniPlaces, you will find out that students, and that students will find out about us. So we really try to maximize the presence in each university. Like we do that through a number of efforts. We do partnerships with university. We go to speak to the different offices, different people, which is very much a top-down approach. Then we have a student ambassador network, so we deploy students across each campus and the main cities, and they represent the brand, they engage the students, they participate in events, everything to spread the presence. We have about 300 ambassadors today across all cities, and that's proven to be a great channel, as well to acquire directly students to come to our platform.
Nice chat we had. I think we are around out of time. There was one question, are you hiring? So there's guy Islam who will approach you.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're growing, you're constantly hiring. So Islam, if you are interested, you should speak with him.
We're hiring at the moment, definitely. We have about 40 positions open, so definitely, we're looking. Our main office is in Lisbon, so that's where the majority of hires are, but we're also looking for people in all our, in Berlin, in Madrid, in Barcelona, Milan, across all the key cities in Europe where we are focusing on.
Nice, thank you so much.
Thank you.